Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 276th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger. We got a special one for you tonight, folks. I'm very excited. We rarely get to do special guests anymore. We're too obsessed about lots of really stupid things like In-N-Out burgers and God knows internet connections in Redmond or Toronto. But tonight we have a special guest we'll be introducing in just a moment. And probably if you're watching this on a recording, you already know who the special guest is because his name's in the title. So you already know. It's not going to be too big of a surprise, but we're very excited about it. Before I bring in our special guest, let me bring in the crew after a very triumphant Monday Night Football, folks. Holy crap. This is going to be fun. So Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. Nathan, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. Should we start thinking about what to do for our 300th episode celebration? That 276 is such a big number.
That's so true. We went pretty big with 200. That was like Mina and Katie Nolan and Joe Fan. I don't know. We have to maybe have our guest tonight back on for that. That would be cool. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good call out. So good to see you, Nathan. We will talk more in a second. Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter. Dayna, how are you doing on this Thursday evening?
I'm still basking in the glory of Monday night, so everything is wonderful.
It was so nice. It was so nice. And then finally, and certainly not least, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. Jeff, what is happening, man?
Not too much, man. I don't know if you've had a chance to see any of the Thursday night game tonight, Brian. Your favorite player on last year's Seahawks is having a game. Cody Barton, man.
I got a text message from Mr. Jeff Simmons like 20 minutes ago. He's like, "Are you watching this? Cody Barton sucks."
Did you see the play where he gets dragged for 20 yards?
I did not see it.
Go on my Twitter. I tweeted out that one, and then the one he gave up the touchdown on the next play. It's pretty unbelievable.
I mean, talk about addition by subtraction. There may never have been a better example. And immediately after you sent me that text, I went and looked up on Pro Football Focus because I was just curious. Out of all starting linebackers in the NFL that have had at least 150 snaps in the NFL, there's 55 of those. Cody Barton ranks 55 out of 55. So we weren't imagining it all these years, folks. He is truly not good at playing the linebacker position. Fine special teams player. Okay, we will talk more about all things football and Seahawks, but let me bring in our special guest tonight. He, for folks that don't know, honestly, like, is pretty special for me. And I think special for a lot of our listeners here. When I moved to Seattle in 1997, fresh out of school, I would drive into work and I would listen to this radio show. And often it would kind of set my day in the right direction. Some of the best interviews with all people in sports you'll hear on any radio show. It was between hilarious and moving and insightful, and taught me a bunch about how to do interviews. And I have nowhere near this person's capabilities in that regard. But really, really happy to bring aboard Mitch Levy, formerly of Mitch in the Morning, now of Mitch Unfiltered. And he's doing this, folks. He's doing this Jeff Simmons style. He's doing it on the East Coast time. So he's traveling with family, and he is gracefully adding his time to his schedule, coming in here at late on the East Coast. And Mitch, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Well, it's great to be here. It's thrilling to have Brian on our show, Mitch Unfiltered, here on a weekly basis. But I've been wondering, what do I have to do to talk to Nathan, Jeff, and Dayna? Like week after week, I've been pounding my head against the wall, asking my wife, what do we got to do to get on with Nathan, Jeff? I mean, I can talk to Brian anytime. And the answer clearly is the Seahawks have to have 11 sacks in a game. And there it is. 11 sacks is what it takes. So every time, I'm hopeful that I will get an invitation after every 11 sack performance by the Seahawks the remainder of the season.
I'll make you a one-time deal here, Mitch. They can just we'll cut it at double digits. Every double digits, you come on. We'll make it simple.
By the way, when was the last time? One of you guys should know. When was the last time the Seahawks had double-digit sacks in a game? Do we even know that?
I can tell you if somebody else wants to talk for a second. I'll find that out. But
I think wasn't it Green Bay? The Green
I
Bay
will
game
tell you.
Because I know, like, did they have 9 or 10? Now I can't
I
remember.
think it might have been 8 or 9.
This is
Yeah, it
fantastic.
might not have
This
been
is
double
fantastic.
digits.
Conversation. I'm sure people
Sorry.
want to wait while I look. I will look this up.
My fault.
No, I love it. I love it. So, Mitch,
Yes.
I'm gonna unfortunately not let you talk to the rest of the folks for a few seconds because I want to hog you. So this is the first chance I'll ever have to actually interview the person who I've listened to do interviews all these years, and so I'm just really curious. You are a fan of the Dolphins. That was your childhood team, yes,
Yes.
and you are a fan of the Seahawks.
Very much.
What was your childhood like as a sports fan? Were you a one team fan?
Right.
Were you a multi-team fan? Were you a multi-sport fan? How did your sports obsession begin?
Well, I was a kid who loved to play like just about the rest of us, and always wanted to be around sports for the rest of my life. And it was very soon after I started playing that somebody told me that I'm never going to be able to make a living playing it. So
They had to tell you that. You didn't figure that out yourself.
Well, I still think I got a shot at 56, but no, I played all the sports every season. I grew up in a family with 3 boys. We all played sports. My family, my mother and father sacrificed everything that they were doing just to be with us. It was just a very similar sports background to probably a lot of your listeners. And I love sports and I watch sports. But to your question, I grew up in Palm Beach County, Florida, which is about 90 minutes north of Miami. And I grew up in the 70s there. There was no Miami Heat. There was no Miami Marlins. There wasn't even, when I started watching college basketball, there was no Miami Hurricane basketball. They actually did away with the Miami Hurricane basketball program after Rick Barry played there. So I loved all the sports. I had favorite sports teams. The Braves, the Atlanta Braves were my favorite baseball team because they trained in my hometown, spring training, and they were the closest to where I was. But there was nothing quite like the Dolphins because the Dolphins were everything in South Florida in the 1970s. And what happened in 1972, and the history of Don Shula and then Dan Marino after Bob Greasy. So, yes, there was always a great love affair between me and the Dolphins that maybe didn't exist between me and the other teams but I watched it all. The only thing I didn't watch was hockey. We didn't know anything about hockey. I see Jeff smiling. I mean, we didn't even know what ice was in our drinks. Honest to goodness, when, in the old days, when you watch the news as a kid to see the sports section of the news, like the 5-6 minutes local sports on the 11 o'clock news. Nobody does that anymore. I don't think anybody does that anymore. They wouldn't even show scores of the NHL. It was like it didn't even exist. So I didn't get no attachment to hockey, but everything else I loved. I played, I loved, but the Dolphins were my true love because that was the team that I went and watched and was 90 minutes away. Yeah. And they were great in those days. Right.
So a couple more questions, then I'll turn folks loose. So there's a big story that came out this week, and it had nothing to do with the Seahawks.
Uh-oh.
This was about the Mariners. Oh. And I think you've heard about this. And for folks that haven't, for Jeff and Dayna, perhaps not. Their GM came out and said his goal is to win 54% of the time. And honestly, Nathan, this reminded me of conversations you and I have had over the years of what it means, what the goal is every year. And he said something also along the lines of, if our goal is to win the World Series every year, if we tried to win the World Series every year, we could really fall in the mud and not be able to get back up. And so he had some points he was making. I won't go too much deeper. But Mitch, my question for you, lifelong Dolphins fan, and you can even bring this to the Seahawks if you'd like. 10 seasons, the next 10 years, you have a choice of 2 options. 1, they win 1 ring and they lose the rest of every other season is a losing season. Okay. One trophy Every other season's losing.
Mm.
The other option is they make it as far as you want every year. Winning team every year. Do not make it to the Super Bowl. Do not win a ring. 10 straight years. Which do you pick?
Oh, that is a really hard question. How come you didn't tell me before the show started that you're going to ask me that so I could prepare my answer?
For me, it's a very easy one to
No,
answer.
I know that the easy answer is we want to win a world championship,
But it might not be a real one. What's your gut? Why is that a hard answer for you?
It's a hard answer for me because I'm not willing. I mean, those are nine pretty lousy years you're telling me I'm going to have with the world championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like 9 bad years. So I guess the first question I have for you is how long am I going to live? If I'm going to only live 60, let's say I'm only going to live 50. I'm at 56 now. Let's say I'm topping out at 57.
You're going to live for all 10 years.
I want the 10 years. I mean, I don't know how much time I've got on the earth. So, the easy answer is I want a world. I know where you're going with it. I want a world.
I honestly am curious because Nathan, if I asked you that question, what would your answer be?
I think I'd take the 10 years of winning.
I think you would too. That's consistent.
That's what I would. I think I would too.
That's a lot of winning.
I think the point, where I thought you were going, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, having heard the comments. I actually just did a show on Mitch Unfiltered. I do one with Danny O'Neill, who used to be with the Seattle Times and 710 Cairo, and with us way back in the day on KJR. And we just talked about how poor the presentation by Jerry Dipoto was. Like, if there was any public relations firm that was working with the Seattle Mariners and they watched this having no idea what they were going to say, what he was going to say, they would have said he violated every single rule, every possible rule to what he should have said behind that microphone. It was awful. And I thought you were going to talk about when he said, for those of you that are patient, we're doing Mariners fans a favor. The last thing I think Mariner fans wanted to hear the day after they didn't make the playoffs, they were the odd team out, is we here at the Seattle Mariners are doing you fans a favor.
Well, I know everyone's dying to talk Seahawks, which we will get to. But Jeff Simmons, did the Jays do you a favor by getting into the playoffs and getting, you happy how it's going for the Jays?
No, I don't know if you saw any of that series against Minnesota. That was the most despicable. Yeah. I don't know if you saw game 2 where they pulled their pitcher after 3 innings.
Yeah.
That was a horrible team, the Blue Jays this year. Like, you guys probably have music to all your Mariner fans' ears, but they had such an unlikable season and lost in such a pitiful fashion. Yeah, just when the Dipoto thing's going on, Blue Jays fans, it's been ugly.
It's rough. It's rough. So, Jeff, I want your answer to that 10-year question. What's for you?
I'd probably rather take the 10 years of competitiveness. I think they're like the Giants, and they won those Super Bowls with Eli Manning, and you saw what they were on Monday night, and you saw what they've been with Daniel Jones and even the end of Eli Manning. And yeah, it's great to have the rings, but being irrelevant for 9 years is tough.
Well, Brian, if I could throw one thing in, you can tie this to the Seahawks.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Well, let's assume that the Seahawks, everything about the last 10 years was the same about the Seahawks, except for one thing. Let's say they lost to the Broncos in the first Super Bowl. So they lost to the Broncos, and then they lost to the Patriots. And in the meantime, they've done nothing but essentially make the playoffs every single year and be competitive. Well, there's what you're talking about, right? That would be the scenario that you're talking about. It's been I think it's been an exceptional 10 years, regardless of the championship, whether they would have won that or not. And I think had they lost to the Broncos, we'd be sitting here saying, my God, what a decade of Seahawks football. Would we not be?
This is where I'm different than maybe the rest of this crew here. I wouldn't trade a ring for anything. I would lose for 20 years for a ring.
Really?
Like, I think that moment of being the best team in the league and being it, and I know Nathan's going to say it doesn't mean you're the best team. I know, but it is how we measure the best team. And I wouldn't trade 2013 for almost anything. I hadn't experienced winning a championship. I was too young when the Blazers won their championship. Mariners have never made the World Series. I got the Huskies championship and, shared co-championship with Miami. But like, no, that was amazing. So for me, every single piece of analysis I do about the Seahawks is whether they're getting closer to a ring, not whether they're just going to be sustainable for 10 years. Dayna, I think I saw you were on everyone else's side on this, right? You'd take the 10 years winning.
I do struggle with that question just because the year the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, my favorite soccer team, Sporting Kansas City, also won their championship. So it was like the greatest sports year ever for me. And so I always am trying to get back to that. But at the same time, I don't want to watch a team that's unwatchable, right? And so if it's like constant crap, like what's going on Thursday Night Football, I don't want to watch that. I don't know that I'd be invested after 10 years anymore, which maybe then I'll get a bunch of terrible fan quotes. But just saying, it's like, I think I would rather have a watchable competitive team. But I get it, Brian, because that year was insane for me.
That's what it's all about to me. That's the whole point.
I got to call you out. I know you're the host of the show.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Okay, come on. Nathan, help me out here. The guy is sitting here telling us after he's enjoyed the Seahawks for 10 years of both, he's gotten both his cake and he's eaten it too. He's gotten the world championship and he's gotten 9 additional years of great fun football. It's easy to sit up here and say, I wouldn't trade the 2013 World Championship. I'd like to see you be saying that if we've had 9 straight years after the 2013 season of 4-12 and 4-13 football. I don't know that you'd be saying the same thing. Easy.
I lived through the 90s. I watched Kelly Stoffer. Okay. I watched Rick Meyer. Right. I watched Dan McGuire. So I know what it's like to be one of the worst teams and have a decade of total futility. And the only reason that stuff's worth, I watched every one of those games. I obsessed about every one of those games. It's okay. Like, I will always watch. For me, it's all about whether you're going to be best. So like, I hear you though. And I've been hogging the time. I will say before I hand it over, the answer to your question is 1992 is the last time that the Seahawks had 10 or more sacks. That was against the Philadelphia Eagles in Seattle, which they lost 17-20. They actually had 10 sacks in that game and lost.
So I have to wait 31 more years after this appearance.
It might be a while. Yeah, it might be a while.
Will Nathan have any hair 31 years from now? Will he be? I'll
come all the way back around. I'll have like a full head of hair. Yeah, total 180.
All right, Jeff. Any questions you've got? Well, everyone's got an opportunity for a question here, and then we're gonna let Mitch loose and get some rest. So, anything you had for Mitch?
How much you miss Joe Fan relative to Brian?
Oh boy,
you bastard!
See, Jeff's got it going. I miss Joe Fan a lot, by the way. I'm sorry that he's not on the show. I think we really, and of course you expect me to say this, we were caught when we fell backwards without Joe because Brian's been terrific. I mean, he just came right in seamlessly. Anybody who's heard it that's listening to this heard what we call the Seahawks no table. We used to call it the Seahawks round table on KJR, but since we don't have a table and it's everybody somewhere else, we call it the Seahawks no table. And it's Brady Henderson of ESPN.com, the Seahawks insider, and Brian. And Brian just kind of walked right in like he's owned the joint. Like he's been there for the last 5 years of our podcast. So he's
Nathan's
been
smirking.
He's smirking. Like Brian. Yeah, that checks out.
He's been great. I'm thrilled to be on with you guys because I thought, God, I got invited after such a terrific Monday night performance, and I'm still trying to figure it all out. I'd like to hear from you guys what you think about real or fraudulent and how much of it was about the Giants and how much about it was about the Seahawks and where do we go from here? And do we expect that maybe the Seahawks defense turned a little corner after giving up 300 yards passing the first 3 weeks to the 3 quarterbacks? I mean, I'm dying to hear what you guys. I've heard Nemhauser. He's already told me the answer. So let's hear some. We heard from the amateur Nemhauser. Let's hear from the pros now. I'd like to hear from you guys what you think, whether it's real, completely real, or not.
Dayna, you're dying. You're dying
I'm
to go,
dying.
Dayna. Go.
Here's
You're
the
Dayna.
thing. Here's the thing with this game. First of all, it felt like a very Pete Carroll game to me. Like it was super defensive, and the offense did what it needed to do, even through injury and craziness. This just felt like a fun game to me. And we fight about Pete Carroll a lot in our chat. And so I was just happy that he had this game. But you know what was interesting to me, Mitch, was watching this defense start to trust each other again. We saw that and got used to it so much with the Legion of Boom that they just trusted everyone was where they were supposed to be all the time. And you could feel that. And it was heartbreaking when Jamal went out. And I'm still gutted about that because he's one of my favorite players. But I do think that you're right that it's starting to click a bit, because I feel like Quandre is a very kind of hot and cold player. Him getting that interception to me early in the season shows his trajectory up, because when he starts to get streaky, he gets really streaky and he gets kind of on a roll. You see what Witherspoon can do. Woolen's coming back from injury. We're starting to get all these pieces in place, and it was just a lot of fun. So while I do think the Giants are a crap football team, I really do. I think that they are a disaster, and you could tell in their media and everything that happened this week that that's what, that team is just a mess right now. I think this actually had more to do with Seattle and putting together the exact game plan that they needed, because what are you supposed to do to crap teams? You're supposed to beat them. And they did, and they did it handedly.
But they were supposed to do that with Carolina, which was considered a crap team.
I don't think Carolina is a crap team, though. I think that's a little different, but
And their offensive line was supposed to be a lousy offensive line. At least that's what Nemhauser told us on Mitch Unfiltered, that their offensive line was going to. So I mean, I hear what you're saying, Dayna, and I hope you're right.
Me too.
I hope you're right. The one thing that I would say, and I've been saying using the word queasy for the last 8-10 weeks about the whole Witherspoon thing, not playing, hurt during training camp, watching Jalen Carter in Philadelphia. I've been a sucker. I'll raise my hand. I've been the sucker that's been saying, oh my God, what did they get themselves into? So Witherspoon comes out, and Brian and I talked about this a little bit on Monday morning show. So Witherspoon comes out and he plays a great game. Obviously, was he the player? Was he announced the player of the week?
NFC Defensive Player of the Week. Yes.
Okay, I'm in DC and I've been running around. I didn't know that. So he plays a great game. But what I would say to Nathan and Jeff and Dayna is, what's interesting about Witherspoon is, and maybe I'm a pipe dreamer here. I'm gonna put my Seahawks cap on a little bit. He not only had a great game, but he's got an infectious way about him. There's something that's hard for me to articulate about the way he plays. It's one thing to come out and have a great, let's take Woolen for a second. We all like Woolen, and he was great last year. But I don't know that I ever watched Woolen play last year, guys, and felt like, oh my God, he made everyone around him like he was a domino effect for everybody. There was something about Witherspoon on Monday night. It made me feel that Quandre Diggs came out. He popped somebody right after, and some other defensive backs came. There was something a little bit contagious to me about Witherspoon's performance on Monday night that seemed to filter to the rest of the team. Did you guys see that at all?
He's got the same vibe as like a Marshawn or a Sherm or this is kind of a weird one to throw out there, but like Hasselbeck kind of had that, where like he's quarterback, but like you always felt them out there, like, and they just had a presence. And yeah, I think I was trying to think about this. Maybe somebody on here can throw out a game, but like I can't think of a game by any player that was more dominant than what we saw from Witherspoon. I mean, there have been, great games. Like there was a Clowney game a couple years ago, and just for Dayna. And I mean, there's been lots of great games by Sherman and other folks, but like, I don't know. Like, I guess Jamal Adams in that first game as a Seahawk, he was really
Bobby Wagner's had games over the years where he's had 20 tackles or 22 tackles and dominated the game his first time around, right?
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
but I don't know. I feel like this is one of the greatest performances I've seen from an individual player ever. And I know like that Giants team is crap, so like sure, put an asterisk on it, but it was amazing.
I was just tweeting while you guys were talking because, I wasn't going to be involved in that conversation. And it is worth calling out the Seahawks the last 3 weeks. Geno Smith wins Air Player of the Week. Kenneth Walker wins Offensive Player of the Week. Then Devin Witherspoon wins Defensive Player of the Week. I'm not sure the Seahawks have had 3 weeks in a row of different parts, like passing, running, defense, like not just good, but like best, like a player that is the best of the best for that week. It's an interesting trend we're seeing. And I think the question we all have to answer is like, what's the ceiling for this team? Like, how good can they get? And what is going to be their limiting factor? And I don't know, Mitch, if you have something that right now, like with what we've seen, what do you think is the Achilles heel of this team?
Well, you're putting me on the spot. You're going to make me say something that's going to be awfully unpopular, but I still would say pass defense. I got to see it more than 1 week. I mean, this is a team that still in 4 games gave up 300 plus to Matt Stafford, gave up 300 plus to Jared Goff, gave up 300 plus to Andy Dalton, though he threw it 55 times or whatever it was. You got to do it more than once against Daniel Jones and that offensive line. But as an old partner of mine on the radio, I think I said this to you the other day, Brian, Hugh Millen used to say, Mitchie, we'd sit at the shanty on Elliott Avenue across from the old station in Seattle, this little tiny hole-in-the-wall restaurant, and he would say over his pancakes, he would say, Mitchie, football is – Hugh Millen, by the way, a former longtime quarterback, played at Washington, was a backup quarterback and a starting quarterback in the league. He'd say, Mitchie, remember, football is about 5 equal parts. An NFL team is 5 equal parts. Run offense, pass defense, run defense, and special teams. They're 5 equal parts. And when you look at that, the run offense has been, especially considering their backup offensive lineman, has been fairly productive. I mean, even on Monday night, the one guy averaged 4.7 yards a carry, and the other guy averaged 7 yards a carry. So it's been functional. It's been probably better than functional. Their pass offense wasn't good on Monday night, but we'll see. It's been okay. Their run defense, Brian points that out every time on Mitch Unfiltered, how great, how incredible their run defense is. And so, and the special teams, I don't like the kicker. I like the punter. But I would just say, if you're asking me for the Achilles heel at this point, week 4, after 4 weeks, I got to see it more than 1 week in the pass defense, would be my opinion.
Did Hugh Millen really eat a microphone after the whole Russell Wilson thing?
Never did.
He never did?
Never
I thought he actually did. Okay.
Oh, God. And I think we should all write him and ask him, when is that going to happen?
Oh, he would appreciate that.
Fraud. Absolute fraud. Crazy.
That's right. We have someone on our show, Evan Hill, who was supposed to get a tattoo of Rashad Penny on his nipple.
What?
Yes. And
for what?
He made a declaration on Twitter that if Rashad Penny had his first 100-yard game against the Rams many years ago, that he would get his face tattooed on his chest with his nipple as the eye.
Oh, my God.
And then he did it. And there's actually, I think there was like Rashad Penny did it. And then there was articles that came out interviewing Evan, and eventually he was convinced to get a temporary tattoo on there. And so he went farther than Hugh, I would say. I'd give him at least that.
Did you guys, by the way, did you think that Jamal Adams flashed a little bit on that first drive before he got hurt?
He looked. No, I love it.
I was super happy for him. I mean, he obviously came up and made that big hit. Came up and made the tackle that he unfortunately got hurt on. But like, I think we'll see what he ends up. I mean, give him time. Like, he's still his first game back. Probably should have had that first sack. I think old Jamal has that first sack. So we'll see if that's rust he can shake off or not. I mean, I was just saying, like, is he 100%? Is he 100%? Is he 100%?
That is a wonderful, wonderful Nathan take. We won't talk about Darrell Taylor missing the same sack after having missed no time later in the game on a 4th down, not outside shoulder containing. Dayna, I know you have the real answer to this question. What do you think the answer is?
I thought he looked fantastic, but we discussed this, you know what I mean? Because again, huge Jamal Adams fan. But here's the thing. What we have noticed, we brought this up before, what we've noticed is that Pete Carroll is not putting these players out there until they are ready to go 100%. He sits on them. They're not on pitch counts. They're not slowly easing them back in. It's you are full go. And so that's what I saw from him. And then the pure, adrenaline rush from him, you could see in those. I think that's probably why a couple of his plays weren't perfect, because he was too jacked up for it, to be honest with you. But yeah, I thought he made an impact the minute he hit the field. And then of course it was just crushing to see him get that knee to the head, and it was awful.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm real excited to have him back. Very excited.
Mitch, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and spending the time. We could spend all night. We are going to have to get to some Patron questions and some other pieces, but let's make a promise to bring you back and do this again. I think we all have more stuff to talk about. Hopefully the Seahawks give us plenty to do that with. Tell folks where they can find you on Twitter and on Patreon.
Great question. I haven't been asked that before. Mitch_Seattle is my Twitter, well, X, whatever you want to call it.
Twitter,
and then it's just Mitch Unfiltered. We do a weekly show that's free for everybody that comes out on Mondays. It's between 2 and 3 hours long, has 3 guests during the football season. Brian Nemhauser is one of several guests that are on every week.
Listen anyway.
Neuheisel is on. We have Neuheisel, and we have Brady, and we have different guests. So that's a long one on Monday that's available to everybody. And then we do shorter shows for the Patreon subscribers. We do about 5 shorter shows that are about 30 minutes long with Danny O'Neill and my old friend Slick Hawk and Randy Mueller, the former GM of the Seahawks, Dolphins, and Saints. And we do about 4 or 5 of those guys for the patrons each and every week. And it's all called Mitch Unfiltered. You can find it just about anywhere. And thank you for what you guys do. I really appreciate the invite. I'd be happy to come back anytime, especially after double-digit sacks, because as I told you the story, Brian, real quickly. I had a really great relationship with Mike Holmgren back in the day, and he and I, got along really well. And one day, he would listen to the show. He liked the stories about my father and so forth. And he would call me and say, did he really do that? And that was great. Come over to the Seahawks. And I came over to the Kirkland office when they were in Kirkland to be with Mike, like his second year, whatever it was. And we're walking down the hallway. I'll never forget it. Walking down the hallway to his office. He's a giant of a man, mountain of a man. And he stops and he looks at me and he says, Mitch, have I ever told you that you're obsessed with the pass rush? Because he was so tired of hearing me say, not enough pass rush, not enough pass rush, he's so tired of it. He pointed me in the finger and I said, and since then, that was like whatever year he came here, a year after he came here, I've been known as the guy that's been obsessed with the pass rush. So I'm happy to be here after double-digit sacks. I hope you'll have me back again.
Perfect association. You can find him on Twitter at Mitch_Seattle, and look up Mitch Unfiltered on any podcast place you get your podcast. It's a great podcast, tons of great content, and go support Mitch over at Patreon as well. Mitch, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your trip. Welcome back when you get here.
Thank you, guys. Right. Nice to see you guys. Thank you.
Take care. All right, folks. That he is one of the best interviewers and best storytellers. He can spin a tale. I'm pretty sure he had that experience all growing up, that people just listen when he talks. So he's definitely one to check out his podcast. So now let's just talk about this game. Let's talk about this game. Who wants to go first? Who's dying to talk about this? Jeff, you've been a little quiet. What's you've been a little up and down on the Seahawks. Are your expectations now where they were at the beginning of the season? Above your expectations at the beginning? Below? Where are you relative to where you started with this team?
This game started to bring me a little higher. And so much of the things we've talked about over the past offseason is just a lot of the issues. Everyone says, oh, Pete Carroll can't coach defense anymore. And there's certainly a case the last 6 years. It hasn't been great. But My pushback always is just the defense hasn't had really any talent. And I thought the talent's been weak for a while. This was a game where we saw the talent infusion, especially on defense, really come to life. And the thing I've been hammering on, and me and you've been talking about, Brian, for a year now, is you look at this team and who are the blue chip studs? Who are the guys who are going to be those studs, the players I thought when I analyzed their roster, I thought 1 to 40, they were really, really strong. And as Nathan said perfectly to his answer to Mitch before, Witherspoon looked like an elite player. And just having a guy that can just have that dominant impact on the game, that raises your ceiling because they don't have a lot of those blue chip players. You saw it a couple of years ago in that one game from Jamal and Clowney. And we talked about it before, like those force multipliers. And Nathan mentioned all those players. He kind of reminded me of Earl. Like when Earl looked absolutely dominant, that's sort of what Witherspoon looked like. And having a guy like that, and the crazy thing is this is his third game. He looked really good in that Carolina game. And then he was the best player on the field last game. Having a guy like that, it changes your ceiling. And just the force multiplying impact on the rest of the secondary, the fact that he can add to the pass rush, and seeing some cool trends carry over from the week before where they did have a ton of pressures. You talked about, I know Carolina, they had 13? I think they led the NFL in pressures that week too.
2 weeks in a row.
Guys like Mario Edwards and kind of guys we scoffed at in the offseason, Jaron Reed and Draymond Jones flashed a lot, and Bobby had a fantastic game. Brooks, and like, you watched Carden play tonight. I know I kind of joked about that. And you compare that to how Brooks and Wagner have looked. There is a talent infusion here. And again, the question to me was always, who are those frontline players? And that's what kind of sets their ceiling against, say, a San Francisco. But seeing Witherspoon do that, to me, it has to raise my expectations in the ceiling of the team.
Dayna, you and I love defense. I mean, it is playing against, New York, and we talked about this with Mitch a little bit, but we don't really have a great offense we're going to face for a little while. When next team we're going to be playing is the Cincinnati Bengals, who are struggling with Joe Burrow, but they do have Jamar Chase. Do you go into that game expecting something that looks like what we saw on Monday night? Do you go into that game expecting something like what we saw against Carolina? What's your expectation for the defense starting the next time they play?
I think that's probably one of the harder games to call. Let's be honest. We have to see how Joe Burrow looks this week. He's obviously injured. He's been playing injured, and so we don't know what we're going to get out of him. Then T. Higgins had a rib injury this week too, though he says he's going to play. I mean, they're banged up. It's a banged up team. So how well they put themselves together this week will determine a lot of what I think is going to happen the next week. But I don't think that we will get this type of game again this year. I mean, it's definitely possible. I just think that this was such a blowout. And besides, let's be honest, Seattle loves a Monday night football game, right? Like, they just love it, and they love being under the lights. And so I think that had a lot to do with it. I think this had a lot to do with the team, really being jacked up to be back in that stadium again. But if I'm looking at this objectively, I think it's probably a little more like Carolina. I think that the defense is going to have their moments where they, miss, and people are going to, I hate to say figure out a player, but it does happen, with Witherspoon. He'll have a little bit more on tape. They can scheme a little bit better. But Cincinnati is a good team. I don't want to, ignore them, but at the same time, they're a banged up team. So that's hard for me to call until I see how they play this week. But yeah. I will say this. I will say this once again, and I keep preaching this, and people are probably sick of me saying it, but I'm going to say it again. Once Seattle gets all the players they want on the team, on the field at once, I think is where we're really going to see what this defense is about. Having Jamal there with Witherspoon, with, in the slot or not in the slot, or even though he said he liked playing nickel and, or whatever it may be, when they get those chess pieces set out on the field the way they want them, I think that's when we're actually going to see this team at full strength. And it could look a lot like what we saw this week against a bad team.
Yeah. Let's hope that's true. Nathan, who's a player that people are talking too much about? Like it's that's maybe getting more pub than necessary, and maybe who's somebody who's under the radar? Like, what's the story on this team that you think is not getting enough attention? Anything come to mind for either of those?
I think people might. I think so. There's two things that immediately come to mind, and they're related to each other, and it's JSN and the tight ends. I think people are talking too much about JSN. I think people are probably too worried about JSN, and we're not talking enough about the tight ends. And the tight ends are why. Look, is it great that JSN is basically a total non-factor? No, that's not good, obviously. But the tight ends have been amazing. They've been doing all kinds of creative stuff with the tight ends. Between the how they use them, how they line them up, and the stuff that they're actually doing with the tight ends, and then how well they're all playing. Noah Fant doing his best to make me look dumb. One of many players that's achieved that. I think that's just been an amazing story, and I'm surprised that it hasn't gotten more traction with like the film heads too, because it's unique and it's really neat.
I think that that's a fantastic call about Noah Fant. I think that's a guy, like tight ends we've talked about a little bit, but Noah Fant in particular, that guy's, I think he's second. Let me see. He's
a top 5 tight end this year, at least by numbers.
Yeah, he's second on the team in receiving yards. He's behind DK. He's above Tyler. Like, I don't think anyone would have predicted that. Not in receptions, but in yards. Speaking of predictions, we're through our first 4 games. Anyone remember what they predicted the records were going to be after 4 games? Because Nathan and Jeff are the same.
2-2.
You guys had a 2-2. Dayna and I, Air 5, both 3-1. Dayna, you had them losing in New York. We had the same exact predictions. We both had them lose in New York. So we were actually 2 out of 4 on our predictions, technically, but right there.
So I went and looked at this, and I saw that I had them losing to New York. And yes, like I had
a very different team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just watched them murder New York, the Giants. So like, but I could not remember for the life of me why I picked them to lose that game. Like,
well, the Giants were like either a playoff team or they were very close to being that last year, right? Like they were
a playoff team.
Fraudulent. Like they had a negative point differential, right?
Yeah, I just thought. I mean, Brian Dable, Wink Martindale, that was a well-coached team. So I did expect them to be better this year. Monday Night Football and whatever, it didn't turn out that way. My question for each of you before we start getting into Patron questions, and by the way, I will probably go well past 8:00 for whoever can stick around, but I will remind you what your predictions are for the next 4 games, and I want to know, not like for each individual game, but record. And again, the teams that they're going to play at Cincinnati, 2 home games in a row against Arizona and Cleveland, and then at Baltimore. Okay. If it matters at all to you, the Cincinnati and Baltimore road games are 10 a.m. games for what it's worth. And the home games are just normal 1:00 games. I had them going 2-2. Nathan, you had them going 2-2. Jeff, 2-2. Dayna, 2-2. Jeff, what's your expectation right now about what the record's going to be for those next 4 games?
I'd put it 3-1. I put 3-1. Some of it has to do with injuries. Some of those teams a little less formidable than I would have guessed. And there's just some things I've learned. Like, I thought one of the reasons Seattle would struggle against the Giants, I picked them to lose that game, was I thought the interior offensive line was still a bit of a problem. And if you would have told me that going up against Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, that you would basically have 5 backups and they would be a non-factor in the game, I would have laughed in your face. And I really don't think that storyline is being talked about enough. And I know there's been some videos on like how good Olu looked and some of those things. And I would have been shocked. You've seen you tweeted the other day the job Andy Dickerson's done. I thought when both tackles went out that this team was screwed. I thought they were going to be seriously in Caleb Williams territory. I thought the offense would just collapse. And the fact that they went 3-0 without them, and now you're getting on teams that look a little banged up. Cleveland, their defense looked pretty good, but their quarterback's hurt right now. Cincinnati's been shit. this whole year. Arizona, I was a little better than I would have thought, but they could go 4-0 even during the stretch. Baltimore's a tough team. That's a tough matchup for them. But
they're getting Marlon Humphrey back as well.
Yeah, they're getting a little healthier. The receivers are coming back, but I think there's every reason to think 3-1.
Nathan, how about you? You were 2-2. What would you be your expectation now?
I'm just not quite ready to give up on the Bengals, I guess. And the Browns are a tiny bit frisky. What is the Deshaun Watson prognosis?
I think he's supposed to be fine.
He'll be back.
That team's much more about their defense. I mean, they are like the best defense in football by a lot of metrics.
Yeah. So this week they got crushed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, like I definitely feel like 3-1 is much more likely now than I did at the start of the year. But I'm not going to be sad if they come out of this 2-2.
Dana.
Same. I can see them beating Cincinnati now, especially if they're not getting those players back. Where I didn't see that as a win in any way for them before the season started. But I still think that Ravens team is just going to be way too strong for them. Just, I don't know, containing Lamar Jackson will be harder. So 3-1 makes more sense, but I'm with Nathan. If they end up 2-2 out of that stretch, I'll be thrilled.
Here's the thing. I think we're all shell-shocked from the first game and from watching the defense for the first 3 weeks. And I think
the last 5 years.
I think we are forgetting the fact that Charles Cross is going to be back after the bye and that Abe Lucas is going to be back hopefully the week after that, and that the offensive line will actually be able to be intact, and that they'll be able to not have to play 2 and 3 tight ends as often, and that Jamal Adams will be back. And I think he did look good. And I will be disappointed if they lose any of those games at this point. I believe I actually I think Baltimore is good. I don't think that that's a great matchup for Baltimore. I don't think what Baltimore does matches up well. I think Witherspoon and Zay Flowers is a wonderful matchup. I can't wait to watch that. But we'll see. We'll see each week, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I could look totally stupid for saying it, but that's my honest, those teams are not good. Other than Baltimore, those teams are not good. So we'll see. It's going to be these next 4 games. They're pretty key to determining what the ceiling is for this team, because none of these games are good luck, you got no chance kind of games. Each one of them, even if you're not sure what they're going to do, they got a chance to win each and every one of those games.
Honest to God, if they come out of those games 3-1, that makes me feel a lot better about all those games right after Thanksgiving and after. Do you know what I mean? I feel like we get a little bit of cushion. Plus, I feel and I can't wait to watch San Francisco versus Dallas, because I want to see Dallas against a real team and see what happens. But I think if they come out of this next 4-game stretch 3-1, holy cow, that changes a lot for me.
I don't know if it does for me. I think 2-2 and 3-1 here isn't a huge. Well, I'm looking at the.
It was just funny.
I know. So the Niners will play 5 games over the next 4 Seahawks games, right? Because of the bye. The Niners have the Cowboys, the Browns, the Vikings, the Bengals, and the Jaguars. There's a very good chance that team is 8-1 or 9-0. And so, even at 6-2, 6-2 or 5-3 for Seattle, I don't you're still trailing the Niners in a big way. Now you have 2 games against the Niners to make that up. But I think if we're talking about what really swings the season for Seattle, it's winning the division. And if they don't go 4-0, I think it's going to be hard to see them doing that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a totally different conversation. I think the 49ers are really in a league of their own, at least in the NFC. I know the Eagles are 4-0, but I don't think they're anywhere near. I don't think they're anywhere near the 49ers.
Yeah.
I think this game this week, Jeff, Niners against Cowboys, that's going to be fascinating. Cowboys played pretty well last year, and their defense is pretty good. Unfortunately, they lost Trayvon Diggs or whoever it was, their cornerback. But I'm not, my mind's not about like whether the Seahawks are competing with San Francisco. I'm all about like how many wins can this team stack up and how much better can they be? And can they make that competitive? Could they potentially win one game against San Francisco? I think at this point, I'd say no. I think it's a pretty clear like no, but I'd say that about almost every team in the league. So like measuring against San Francisco feels a little pointless until either they get injured or, you know, something significantly changes with these teams. But yeah, you're right, Nathan. I think divisional record is they already lost one in division. They basically can't lose anymore if they want to win it. Dayna, would you mind pulling up Patreon questions so we can start covering some of those? While you're doing that, folks, if you haven't given the show a like, please do that. Subscribe to the channel. We're growing the community. Love to have you. And go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. You can sign up, be part of the Slack community. Hundreds of folks on there, really good folks. It's not easy making friends in the post-pandemic world. Why not join the Slack community? Share your love for the Seahawks with other nice people. It's a good crew, and all proceeds go to charity. $260,000 plus have already been donated. You can be part of it. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. Dayna, let's take a few questions. What do you got for us?
Well, I just want to make sure you don't want Nathan to do it because supposedly he's so much better.
No, I was very particular in who I asked.
We know who Brian prefers. So.
That's over there.
All right, so let's see here. We're going to start with, I'm just going to butcher your name. It's Kayl. It's very long, so I'm so sorry. I'm just going to say that. How good is the Bengals offensive line compared to the Giants and the Panthers O-line? Could our defense have another feasting in the backfield against the Bengals? I don't know. Is their O-line the part of the team that's real banged up? I'm not sure.
I don't think they're particularly banged. I just don't think they're particularly good.
Okay.
And they've spent a lot of money on offensive line. They just haven't been getting returns. Like they got Orlando Brown from Kansas City to come in and play left tackle. And they've spent a lot of money on some other guys. I can't remember one of the guards. They signed Lyle Collins last year for big money. He's already been released. And Brian could probably pull up the PFF grades, but I just think their ranking – they're in that tier with Carolina and with the Giants. So I don't think it's injuries. I just don't think so. That's been part of the reason. That's part of the reason the whole team sort of collapsed this year.
It's Kalyana Raman.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to assist with the Slack question.
He's just trying to flex on you as a Patreon host.
Well, I feel bad when I can't pronounce a name and I didn't want to butcher it. So actually, I appreciate that.
I think that's very kind of you.
Okay. So this one is, let's see, from Eric. So we saw how effective the defense could be against a poor Giants team, but how do you see it stacking up against the best teams in the league? Was it truly an unlock and indication of what we will see the rest of the year? Nathan, we talked about this a little bit already, but what's your definitive on that?
I mean, it is early. It's hard to say. But I think they were basically full force for at least a second, and then they lost Jamal. And they looked awesome. They looked like everything. I mean, obviously, like unbelievable game on defense. So, you know, obviously probably not going to repeat that the rest of the year, or not often. But I think it's really encouraging, you know, with all the asterisks and all of the discounting it for the Giants and yada, yada. I think you have to be really encouraged that when they looked good, that when they had their best players out there, they looked incredible.
Agreed. Okay. So this one's from Imani. It's kind of a long one. It says, we've all been really hard on the coordinators the past few years. I know I have. I wanted to provide Pete and Hurt with some credit on something. That nickel blitz has changed our season defensively. Trey Brown and Spoon both cashed in on it multiple times, and I think it's been a perfect counter to how teams destroy us with running back checkdowns, wheels, and screens. It'll start forcing running backs and tight ends to stay home in protection and aid our coverage. What's something else you guys would give our coordinators credit for this season, Brian?
Well, I mean, it's easy to go to the offensive line.
Sure.
So I've done that before, so I'll stay away from Andy Dickerson because that's probably too easy. I'll go with Carl Scott. And this is also kind of a double dose because I think there's a player story that's getting undertold as well, and that's around Julian Love. Julian Love was one of the worst safeties in the NFL through the first 2 weeks of the season. He's one of the top 10 essentially in the last 2 weeks. And I hadn't actually looked that up until tonight, but my eyes were telling me that that his game against Carolina was much better than what he had played. He's starting to find his footing. I thought his game against the Giants was excellent. And so I think that the safety, like that secondary, and figuring out how to play the three safeties, how to like utilize some of the guys that they have, I think that's starting to find its footing. And for me, that makes me particularly excited for when Jamal gets back. I think this becomes a much more aggressive, fierce defense and full of guys that are playmakers. So I'll give Carl Scott a little shout on that one.
Awesome.
Well, hold up, Dayna, because I'm gonna tag in on this one. I'm actually gonna swoop in here and steal this next question because you have to answer this one.
I do? Oh,
From
Lord.
Zach. You have to answer the question from Zach. If you had to choose one to have on the Hawks, would you rather have a healthy Jamal all year or a healthy Witherspoon all year?
Witherspoon. And that is not a slam against Jamal because I
slander.
absolutely,
Wow.
It's not slander. He's a rookie. He needs the reps. He needs to be on the field, right? That's how he's going to live. Plus, he looks great. Jamal, we have lived through not having him before. I just think he makes the team so much better. But if you had to go a whole year without one or the other, I'm going to want that rookie to get all that time. I'm going to want him to get those reps and to see how much he can grow. I think that is 100%. I mean, we all know Jamal is toward the end of his career, so we want the young guy to get it. So
isn't he like 26?
No, he's like almost 30, isn't he? I mean, he almost retired. So
27.
Oh, see, so then we could have him for years just to torture you, Nathan. Makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. All right. So, Jeff, this one's coming to you. Pardon me. And I'm going to switch it up just a little bit. Who is a player you'd like to see Seattle get before the trade deadline? I'd like to know if you would like Seattle to get a player before the trade deadline, and what do you think it would cost?
That's a hard one to do off the top of my head. Let me take a look at the standings for a second.
Can I like change this question a little bit maybe? Because
just take over, Nathan. You're great at it.
No. I'm trying to buy time here for Jeff. I'm helping. What is even the position that you go to when you ask, like when you think, okay, who we're going to trade for? What position do you go to and say, well, this is a place where we should add? Because like nothing comes to mind for me. I think that's what makes it like this a really hard question is like, I don't know where I feel like they need to go do something. Kicker.
Yeah, like that's the problem with the question to me. Like if you can go out and get like a Max Crosby.
Oh yeah.
But he's gonna cost 2 first-round picks. Like, are you gonna I don't know, but like I think that's the difference between the Seahawks ceiling. Like if they had the dominant edge rusher or dominant interior defensive lineman with everything they have around them, and you could put that in, then that's the thing that can really push them over the top. But do you want to pay those prices?
Right.
Probably not. Like when you're doing a deadline deal, you're probably hoping to give like a 4th round pick, or what they did with Carlos Dunlap a couple of years ago. It's hard.
Isn't it still the same? Isn't it still the same though, Jeff? Like, isn't it still like if you can get a DeForest Buckner, if you can get a defensive tackle,
yeah.
Jaron Reed's writhing around on the ground the last 2 weeks, and if he goes down, Cam Young started to actually play okay, but like that's it. That's it. There's no more after him.
Well. Yeah.
So like that defensive tackle group, they've been playing well, but Mike Morris is out for the year. You know, I definitely would like. I agree with you guys. It's not like as obvious as it was, but that's still the spot I would add to if I could.
Yeah. Let's see. Nathan or Brian, either one of you. So this one's from Richie. Do you think it would be counterproductive to put Witherspoon back on the outside going forward with how he looked at nickel against the Giants, or are we overrating a performance against an obviously inept offense?
I think that's first of all, it's a little bit of a misinformed question. I mean, he was playing on the outside. He would move into nickel when they needed to be a nickel. So I think he is still playing on the outside. I think what they're asking, the question is meant to say is, should he stay outside and just stay outside and have someone else play nickel? I think this team is better with Trey Brown on the field than it is with Kobe Bryant on the field, or even with Artie Burns on the field. And those are your other real nickel options. Trey Brown has not been practicing, as far as we know, at nickel. If he could, I'd be interested. But Witherspoon is custom made for that spot. I don't know why we would be trying to get him out of it. Let Trey Brown play outside when they want to be in those situations. I think that gets the best out of each of those players, and I think it makes the team much more dangerous. How could you not watch that game and see it's not even just that he blitzed. His instincts, his disguising of when he did it, how quickly he got there, the angles he took. This guy has pass rushed 6 times in his career, and he's either hit or sacked the quarterback on 4 of them. That's not normal. So, I don't want him going farther away unless he has to.
Absolutely. There's a handful of questions about JSN. So I'm going to try and kind of group them all together. PMM wants to know, when do we think JSN will start getting targets past 5 yards? There's a couple of people asking about 5 yards. And then D. Crockett says, are we turning JSN into a thing long before it needs to be? What is your take, Nathan, on JSN? And I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but, what do you think what's the deal with that?
Yeah, I think Professor Crockett's got it right. Like he goes on to talk about, DK Lock tight ends playing so well.
Yep.
And I think that's really the problem, is that there are so many good pieces to this offense. It's hard to highlight JSN. And I think what's actually maybe doing him a little bit of disservice is, I don't think he's going to be he's terrible for all this screen stuff and short passes, try to get the ball in his hands. But it's clearly something that they're trying to manufacture these touches for him, which is probably ultimately a positive, that the coaching staff is going out of their way to make sure he's involved and rewarded. If he was disappointing in practices, I don't think that they would be trying to do that for him. We know Pete is not going to super care about your draft status or anything like that. If you can't play, he's not going to give you those plays. So I think it's really just a factor of this being an incredibly deep and well-balanced offense. And he's just kind of a little lost in that right now.
Yeah. Makes total sense. All right. So this is from Eric. Also, there have been a lot of complaints about scheme on both sides of the ball. What is helping us be better this year? Is it the scheme or the players, Jeff?
I'd say a combination of both. I think defensively, we talked about it a little bit in preseason, but they have schemed a lot differently with their front, especially in run defense. And I think also you have to admit, a lot of the players I talked about it when Evan was telling me that the defensive line, run defense, is going to be unwatchable. I said Bobby is going to have an impact in run defense. And if you watch the run defense last year, there was a lot of plays where it was Barden or it was Josh Jones. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have to give Clint Hurtt credit there. And I think Pete really oversaw that. But a lot of the film guys will tell you they've really schemed their run defense, especially, really well. And they're had answers to everything. They're the top 3 run defense. And some of the players they brought in, we all scoffed at Jaron Reed and Mario Edwards, and they've done a really good job. And they haven't missed guys like Al Woods and Puna and Shelby Harris and all this angst about those guys leaving. Haven't really heard much about any of those guys around the league. And so I think defensively, it's definitely a combination. And I think offensively, I thought Shane Waldron did an awful job in week 1. And I think the last 3 games, he's done a fantastic job. And Nathan did a great job talking about the tight ends. I think the way they've used those tight ends schematically have created a lot of easy throws for Geno when he's getting protected. And Geno didn't do much in the last game, but he didn't need to. And just some of the ways they've schemed, and like that Detroit game, their tight end sets, and the Carolina game in the second half, some of those like two tight ends coming out of the backfield and the way they've used all three of the tight ends, it's been really, really creative. And I think Waldron has done a really good job with some very clear limitations up front. And just the way, like, seeing those five guys are creating easy running lanes for the running backs in the second half of the Giants game. I think a lot of that was good coaching and good scheme. And I think since week one, which was pretty much a disaster on both fronts, I think they have done a really, really good job with scheming. I have some issues with how they've used JSN, but that's such a small factor. I think there's too much energy spent on that right now because they're 3-0 in the last 3 weeks, and they've getting better on defense. And I think coaches deserve credit.
It's interesting. Pete brought up that Rams game again this week in his radio show. It's eating at him. And that's why I don't think that there'll be mistakes like that again. At least I hope not. All right, there's 2 more. All right. So after 4 games, this one's from Derek Woods. After 4 games, what's your assessment of the front 7? Brian, this one's going to come to you. Is the talent, production, and depth at interior linebacker, outside linebacker, defensive end, and tackle sufficient to match the secondary for a strong D? Or do you believe the Hawks need to get a player or 2 before the trade deadline? Just what's your assessment of that front 7 so far? Because we already talked about the trade.
I've been wrong about the linebackers. I mean, I expected Bobby to be good against the run and good in like keeping the team in the right formation and being smart and that kind of thing. I think he's been excellent. I think he's having one of his best seasons through 4 weeks. It's kind of crazy. Jordan Brooks has been I didn't expect him to even playing at this point. He's been playing well. This last game, he was really good. And that's super encouraging. I've been wrong about Devin Bush even. I think Devin Bush, when he's been out there, has been good. And then we already talked about the defensive line. Here's a crazy thing for you all. The Seahawks are tied for the NFL lead in sacks now, right? What if I told you, like, what do you think their top, the person with the top number of sacks, how many sacks does that person on the team have? Any guesses?
2.
Most sacks in the Seahawks. 3?
2.
2 is the right answer.
Yeah.
They have they're 49th in individual rankings for sacks. They don't have anyone barely in the top 50 in sacks, but they are tied for the league in sacks because they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players with 2 sacks and 4 more players with a single sack. You got 10 players on that defense with a sack. Only 11 people are on the field at a time. So this is only week 4. That's not normal. And so I think this front 7 has been much, much better than I expected them. I would say the edges, specifically Darrell Taylor, not necessarily along for the ride. Derek Hall had a better game last week, 5 pressures. But if Darrell Taylor could actually turn on, then maybe that would be the last piece.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah's podcast after the Seahawks game, and he was raving about Derek Hall. And I didn't catch it on the first glimpse at all. And I know, like, Corbin put out some tweets of it. Apparently he had a really good game. I didn't catch that on the broadcast at all because there's so much going on. But that was kind of cool. How did he grade? Like, was he was he one of the guys over 70?
Yes, he was. He was right around 70. I can tell you in just a second, but for some reason it's giving me trouble.
UJ Moore.
Yeah, I know he had 5 pressures.
Oh my god!
In that game. Derek Hall was 70.7 in that game. His pass rush was right around 70, but he had 5 pressures and 2 hits. So
it's a good game. All right, last question. It's for all of us. This is from Nick. I'm giving you each $100 to place a bet. Which rookie will have the biggest impact on the rest of our season? And you can't say Witherspoon. Nathan.
Witherspoon.
You You can't say Witherspoon.
What I just did, Witherspoon. Okay,
Yeah.
I can do it again. Witherspoon.
Try again.
No, it's Witherspoon.
Hey,
No,
it's a fun question.
it's a silly question. Why are we trying to take I don't know.
Because it's the rest of the rookie class.
Because this is a good rookie class. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Nathan.
So wait, is this who we think is going to be?
Going to have the biggest impact outside of Witherspoon on the team.
I'm going to go Anthony Bradford.
It's a good one.
Given the way the injury situation has been, I think that's where I'll go.
You made me real happy to watch him play this week. He was a lot of fun. I'm just going to say Charbonnet just because.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Look what you did to Nathan.
That's
Good
why
job.
I did it. Are you
Good.
kidding? That's exactly why I did it. He's thrown this stupid, clowny crap at me.
I want to hear Jeff's answer to this question too, but I do need to on Charbonnet. Is anybody else having my feeling that you are kind of wanting Charbonnet on the field more than Walker sometimes? Anybody else? No? Am I alone in that?
In certain
situations, yeah.
Yeah. With certain teams. I think he's a bruiser, and I love that.
I'll have to do a little bit of legwork, but I think the amount of runs with Charbonnet that are positive are like his success rate, I think, is probably way over Kenneth Walker's. Kenneth Walker is like
Walker's had one of the better success rates this year, I think.
We'll see. And last you can't count week one.
No.
Yeah.
Can't count week one, but I bet since then it's different. All right, Jeff. Sorry,
I'm still. This might be overly optimistic. That's why I'm still going JSN. I think the risk has been more of an impact than we've thought, but there's been some advanced metrics that have said some things that maybe JSN is doing an okay job and hasn't. In the last game, there were some things I saw personally that weren't like he had that 1-on-1 with the guy in open field and he couldn't beat him. But I sent Brian, I think, a chart yesterday where apparently he's like one of the higher guys in the league at getting like separation on his routes. And apparently he's also one of the higher guys in the league, like 70% of throws that have gone to him that have been off target. So I think the combination of all those things, if they really emerge him back into the offense, if they do play more 11 as the O-line gets healthier, I think there's a chance he really emerges down the stretch. And there's going to be games where they're going to need their offense a lot more. So I think he's going to get significant opportunity. Obviously, he's been an absolute zero so far, and he had like 3 catches, 5 yards last game, and he hasn't been good. But I think I think there's a lot of things playing in his favor that once they drop him into the role we thought he had, and how bad they've been on third down as a team offensively, I think there's a chance he unlocks some things offensively.
Okay, I have a real answer actually. I want to.
You're gonna play the game now.
Yeah, I'm gonna play the game now. It's Devin Witherspoon. No, it's I'm gonna steal one from the chat. Bobo.
Oh Lord.
Bobo is already the second most impactful rookie on this team with his run blocking. He has a touchdown. He looks real. Like he looks like a real, like legitimate wide receiver. I think it's Bobo.
Yeah, I have to break in here, you guys. So I don't know if anyone else is in this horrible situation that I am, but I'm playing against a team that has DJ Moore. Fantasy football. He has 45 fantasy points. He has 230 yards.
Ooh.
And 3 touchdowns. He is
finally
203rd out of 10 receptions.
What a shit show the Bears are. I mean, Chase Claypool, and then to have them come into your place in Washington and run you out of it. Yikes.
The worst.
Yikes. I mean, we get to play the Commanders later.
Bring it on.
Well, thank you, Dayna, for your expert facilitation of the Patreon questions. Patreon.com/HawkBlogger. You too can ask us questions every week. So I just keep wanting to talk about this game a little bit more and this team a little bit more. I'm kind of curious, like, Jeff, what do you think changes? Assume the next game we're getting back Charles Cross. Assume that either Phil Haynes or Anthony Bradford are there. Assume Damian Lewis can play. Assume you kind of get everyone but Abe Lucas back essentially on the offensive line. how much better do you think the offense gets? Like, do you think it's a huge difference? Do you think it's like we won't really notice? What's your expectation there?
It has the potential to have a huge difference. They've been really bad as a passing game on third down. And it's been like when you ask Mitch the Achilles heel, that's arguably been the Achilles heel so far. And they haven't really hit explosive plays on offense. They haven't hit a lot of deep balls. A lot of their explosive plays have come more in the running game. And Jake Curran specifically, he's been having a lot of trouble holding up in one-on-one pass rush situations. Forsyth had moments against Carolina where he was playing Justin Houston and he was just getting thrown around like a turnstile. And if they can kind of held up in pass protection more in obvious passing situations, they've been really good in play action. They've been good on early downs, but in the obvious passing situations, this can really extend their drives and can really unlock their offense. Like last game, I think Geno Smith completed like 10 or 12 passes, and their defense was so good they didn't need to be. But if Lewis, it's Cross and Lucas, and when Lewis gets healthy, and they can really become a good pass protecting line without having to chip people and double team and just have their guys hold up in one-on-one, I think that has a chance to really unlock a part of the offense that really hasn't been part of the team yet. And that was a big part of this year. What's this passing game going to look like? They're going to have shootouts. They're going to have games where they're going to need these guys. They drafted a first-round pick to really play into this. I think that's a part of their team that, again, it just hasn't been untapped yet. And that could be a really thing that can make them have an even higher ceiling than they have right now.
Nathan, what's the part of the team that you think has the best chance of like improving significantly in the coming weeks?
I mean, you probably still want to say pass defense, even though they just had one great game. But yeah, I think that there's more they can get out of this passing game, offensive. So on both sides, those are the areas where they probably have the biggest ceiling. The one thing that was getting like Cross and Lucas back is like you definitely feel better with those two there long term, and obviously their growth potential and everything. But like Forsyth and Curhan have been good enough that like how much instantly better does the team get when they get their starting tackles back in? Like, does it actually represent a huge upgrade with the way that those two have been able to hold up and play? It's an upgrade. I think they'll be better, but I don't like those guys didn't play the way we thought they were going to play.
Dayna, I saw a reaction from you on that.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I think I completely agree. Like I think that the way the backups have played have been fantastic, including Bradford. I have a little football crush on Bradford right now because he was just out there being beastie, right? Like he was just, I loved it. It was so fun to watch. And that's hard for me to say for offense, but I think that Lucas is a big upgrade over Curran. I think Jake has played well enough and he's done what he's needed to do, but I do think that is going to be a big upgrade on that side. Stone Forsyth, I mean, he got beat a few times, but actually never hearing his name called is the best thing you want out of your offensive lineman, right? And we didn't hear his name be called very often. So I think he's played pretty well, but I think more importantly, it'll be interesting to see how much the run game changes and how much more they use that once they get their normal pieces back. Now, did we hear anything about like Phil and everyone coming back, the guards? Have we heard anything? I think that
We
I thought it was
didn't.
minor,
Pete,
right?
Pete always ends up being super optimistic about injuries the day after a big win, and like then reality sets in. So I don't know. We'll
Did
see.
he say legit?
He did not say legit. He made it sound like everyone was coming back.
Okay, good.
Essentially, but
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. So I think that'll be interesting to watch because once you get those pieces back, and I don't remember if it was Jeff or Nathan said this, but then you won't have to have a million tight ends on the field to help with the blocking. And so then what does that change? And so there could be a bit of a domino effect there. But honest to God, if someone gets hurt, let's say out, God forbid, the rest of the season, I feel pretty comfortable with the backups that they have now, especially with the experience they've gotten. So that's really encouraging.
I got a random question. You know that the Panthers are out there advertising that they're looking for a number one receiver, right? I'm not going to ask about the Seahawks. If you think we should trade a receiver, fine, go there. But if you're the Rams, do you trade Cooper Kupp for some picks, first and a second?
They don't have a first this year, though. The Panthers.
The
Don't.
Panthers.
I don't even know if they have a second.
Well, then what? I assume they're gonna have to come up with something good. But if you're the Rams, are you like with Puka Nacua and what they've got going on? Are you like? I guess I'm kind of curious. I know we're talking Seahawks, but I'm like the Rams are like a fascinating team for us this year because Matthew Stafford's like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. He's playing really, really well.
Yeah,
they've got the best rookie receiver ever. Right now. I mean, he's setting every record, and Cooper Kupp hasn't even come back yet. But they're what? They 1-3, 2-2, something like that.
2-2.
2-2. I don't think they're that good. So, like, what's their timeline? What are they building toward? And like, is Cooper Kupp part of that or not?
I'd probably trade him.
I think I would too.
He is 30.
Right?
Cooper Kupp is 30?
Yeah.
I thought he was way younger. God, I got to get up on these ages. I'm not so good at this, I guess. But yeah, I can't decide because Matt Stafford is banged up again, right? And so you know that he's not going to last maybe one more season after this. So who becomes the face of your franchise? Yes, you have this rookie, but what if he doesn't, follow through to the next year? And Cooper Kupp kind of became the face of that. And so I think that they're looking for a little bit of an identity because they're going to lose Aaron Donald here in the next couple of years. But at the same time, if you are looking long-term and longevity, that is going to be your biggest play, is to be able to trade Cooper Kupp, get as many picks as you can for him. But they're right. The boys are right that the Panthers don't have a first-round pick this next year. So you'd have to give up a boatload of everything else. And are you willing to do that for one player? I don't know that the Panthers have just one need. Do you know what I mean?
I would, but even like a year, the next year. So not this year, but next year first. Like that's probably still going to be a pretty good first from the Panthers. But yeah, I like Bryce Young. I'm a Bryce Young believer. But somebody, I think Justice Mosqueda on Twitter just pointed out that the Panthers traded DJ Moore and Caleb Williams for Bryce Young. And
yep.
That's deep.
Yep. All right. Well, so I have other questions, but we'll start wrapping there. Anything else that I'm intentionally not bringing up the Marshawn interview with Shannon Sharp? I don't really feel like going.
Can we talk about the gallon of cottage cheese?
No, I didn't even hear that part.
Is that real? I think that part was I may have. It's real. Nobody go listen and fact check. Russell Wilson ate a gallon of cottage cheese every day.
Wow, that explains so much. Anything else that I'm missing? Any other topics that we should be talking about?
My favorite part of what I just said is, Dana, you really wanted to call BS on that, but like,
no, I believe it. I totally believe it.
I believe anything about, like, I believe so many things about Russ at this point. You could say so much weird stuff about Russ, and I'd be like, I'm not going to go bother to fact check that.
You could tell me that he took a bath in cottage cheese every day, and I'd just be like, okay, probably.
Too. Who knows at this point, right?
He's an oddball.
Can we talk just for a minute? And it makes me vomit just a little bit, but I'm going to say, can we talk for just 1 second? Kind of impressed. Drew Lock came in, shaky little situation. I mean, I don't like quarterbacks. They all are just, to me, but Gino's super hot. Drew just comes in all happy little smile on his face, played well, and then sat right back down. I think he's a great backup quarterback. I was really impressed. He didn't look, I mean, I know he started in the league before, but still, I was impressed, except for he looked a little goofy. I'm not going to lie. That little shit-eating grin he had on the sidelines.
I mean, I was he played fine. I thought Noah Fant did a lot of work for him, but and I think it's very ironic that after Noah Fant made such an impression on all of us by stepping out of bounds on his first attempt in preseason a few years ago, and like last year, I guess in Pittsburgh, that he was able to stay inbounds on that was pretty impressive. Yeah, I mean, he played fine. It was not super. It didn't leave a big impression on me.
But that's what you need, right? You just need someone who's going to come in and play fine. That's why I was like, we're good. Hopefully he'll. But then Gino going on saying he should be a starter in this league. I was like,
I don't know. There's a lot of bad starters.
What about
Fair.
Troy Aikman saying that Devin Witherspoon, that he reminds him of another 21, Deion Sanders? I don't know how you make that comparison. Like, they're not even the similar play, right?
He
Like,
wasn't the only one that said that. I saw that a lot on like Tuesday morning football TV.
Deion Sanders didn't hit anybody.
He was
No, that
famously
was-
known for tackling, right?
That was the whole thing. I think maybe it's just like the swag and number 21.
Maybe that's it.
But, like-
the number confused Aikman.
When he compared him to Palomalu, I kind of rolled my eyes and like, come on, man. Kind of saw what they were talking about last game.
Dude, that hit in the hole on the
Like,
running back?
Yeah, and like the play where he just like jumped through like the offensive player and then just made the tackle, like that's exactly what Palomalu used to do. And I
Yeah.
definitely rolled my eyes. I'm like, come on, you're comparing this guy to like the best safety in the last 20 years.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. And what about Julian Love and Tariq Woolen on the run back?
Man, Love looked fast.
Love, like, I didn't know he zoomed in there.
Yeah.
That was cool to see.
The whole game was just fun, and I was lucky.
Not the whole game.
The whole
The first
game
quarter was awful.
You guys are so dramatic.
No, it was rough.
that
Jeff.
was terrible.
It was
Jeff,
awful. They were like,
can you
"Fucking
win in the
every
first
play."
quarter?
No, it's not even about like the quality of the like 8 million flags and
It was so bad.
It was
concussions.
painful.
Yeah, it's like this is the worst.
It was really bad. The refs, yeah. It
And
was
then, like,
terrible.
when Jason Myers missed the field goal, and I'm like, are they actually going to blow this game? And the Giants are driving down the field to make it like 14-10.
So I was doing the live stream for PSF during that game, and so we're watching, and I'm like, I'm gonna get so much crap for this, but I don't trust this team to win this game even up this far. And it's because what Brian said earlier, we're all shell shocked. We're all used to them losing games that they're supposed to win. But I don't know, it was Monday Night Football, and I just really felt like it was good. But yeah, after a while, it got kind of easy and fun, which we haven't had one of those games in a
I know.
while.
It's true. Honest answer. Last year's Seahawks. Do they win this game? This game against the Giants?
No.
I think so. This Giants
say
team
yes.
is so bad.
Nathan, you say no. Jeff, you say no. Yeah?
Because you replace Devin Witherspoon with Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Oh, well, fair. That's fair.
And Bobby Wagner with Cody Barton.
Bobby Wagner's Cody Barton.
Okay. All right, I'm full of crap. You're right. They lose this.
You know,
one.
Jamal Adams is what's his name? Jones.
Yeah.
What's his
I
name?
haven't heard Ryan Neal's name much this season.
Ryan Neal's one of the worst graded safeties in the NFL.
I told you guys. You guys all called me out when I said he sucked.
Listen, don't keep those receipts, Jeff. Come on.
I mean, I certainly wasn't upset when they went to Julian Love over Ryan Neal.
Right.
That's for sure. But that's the thing. Like, I think that people are not really recognizing yet how different this team is than the team last year. And I think the first game of the season is like this massive, what's the opposite of rose-colored glasses? Like crap smeared glasses. Like, I think they still haven't like cleaned it off yet. And I get it. I totally get it. But I don't know.
Yeah.
If this defense is half as good as they showed in that game, if they're going to be in the top half of the league, the top 10 in the league in pressures and sacks the rest of the year, I think the coverage is going to be good enough. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of hopefully fun stuff again. I think the schedule all of a sudden is looking like it's breaking the Seahawks' way. They got to take advantage of it. Pete's not so good coming out of bye weeks. We'll talk about that next week as we preview the Bengals game. But your Seahawks are 3-1, folks. I want to thank Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter, Nathan Ernst at Nathan Lee 11, and Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons for staying late with us tonight, a 90-minute show. And of course, we want to thank Mitch Levy, our special guest at the beginning, for joining. You can catch him at Mitch Unfiltered on any podcast platform you look on. You can find us if you look for Real Hawk Talk anywhere. So give the show a like, subscribe to the channel, patreon.com/hawkblogger. We will see you soon. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Go Hawks.